All right, Barbara, go ahead.
This is Barbara Becker, and you are listening to Your Superior Self.
Perfect. Barbara, BB, Barbara Becker, how are you?
I am doing great, Trey. It's so good to be here with you.
I'm so glad that you were able to make it. Your new book, Heartwood, it's pretty legit. I like it a lot. What uh what inspired that? First off, explain what Heartwood is because I didn't even know what that was until I read your book. But explain what that is and then what inspired it.
Great. Good place to begin. So, the heartwood is the central pillar of trees. And it's the part that, in many ways, is as strong as steel. It's prized by woodworkers as the best part of the tree from which to build anything. But what people don't really know about that center core is that it's totally inert. It's dead. And it doesn't at all participate in transporting water and nutrients up and down the tree anymore. But without it, the growth rings of a tree, those rings that you see when you look at a tree stump, they wouldn't have any support to grow. So I used it as a metaphor that I found helpful, where the people in our lives who we've lost and loved become our heartwood. So this book is so many heartwoods. My parents are in my heartwood. My earliest childhood friend is my heartwood. And we all continue to grow around their strength and to kind of keep them close, really close inside.
Yeah. You have some really good stories in here. I thought it was funny how you had this skeleton in there. What was his name? Felix?
Felix, the
What
skeleton.
is that about? So, explain to people that haven't heard about Felix.
So my family had a literal skeleton in the closet. I mean, everybody has a skeleton in the closet in the form of family secrets, but we actually had a skeleton. And he was my grandfather's medical school anatomy class prop. And every kid in medical school back in the early 1900s was issued a real human skeleton that they
Ugh.
apparently weren't meant to return at the end of their time in the school. So after he studied Felix, he brought him home, he brought him to his office, and then he passed down to my dad, who became a doctor, and then my mother, who then became a doctor. And yeah, he was, we were like little Hamlets, like Hamlet with this skull in his hands, kind of talking to the head. Like, this is what it was like to have a human skeleton in the house. And we thought everybody had one.
That is, I wonder what happened to the guy that, oh, here's my bones, like it's a,
Yeah, there was a dark part of American history, I think, in which people who didn't have a ton of resources, their bodies just became these elements for medical schools. If their body was unclaimed, they were considered fair game. That would never happen today. And today we have these great plastic knockoffs of human anatomy, so we don't have to worry about it anymore. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think the guy donated his body to science, and that's the really sad part. And it's also, I have to say, the part that inspired me. Like, I feel I owe this guy a debt in some way, so I
sure,
am donating my own body to science when I die someday
because of Felix.
because of Felix. 100%.
Oh, that's awesome. So why death? Why write about it? Why? Because it's very obvious in the book that it's, the central message. It is, I think as you explain it, demystifying death. Why did you feel like you had to do that?
Yeah. So when I was in about third grade, I learned kind of by snooping around in my father's wallet that he had been married before he was married to my mother. I found a picture of my mom in his wallet, and behind it, I could see like the frayed edges of another photograph. And I pried it out, and there was this woman who I had never met before. She was young, she was beautiful. My mom caught me in the act and told me that this was my dad's first wife. My dad had been married to this woman from England, and shortly after their honeymoon, they had gone boating one day, and she fell off, and she was cut by the propeller and drowned with a traumatic head injury.
Mm.
And she was pregnant at the time. So all of this was revealed to me in little bits that were sort of age appropriate. But I really felt that Maureen, which was her name, was a presence in our home. She was, kind of a benevolent presence. And I think my earliest existential question was, somebody actually had to die for me to be born. Because if she hadn't died, my father never would have met my mother. And these things, rattled around in my own brain and my brother's heads. And we really thought a lot about death.
What did your dad ever talk about him? Or excuse me, her?
He did. I asked him at one point, somebody else was operating the boat. And I asked my dad if he hated that man, he lost his greatest love in his life. And he said, no, not anymore. Like over time, that deep pain almost became a compassion for this guy. Like imagine what it would be like to have somebody die at your hands. And he was just, my dad was a beautiful human being who found that kind of grace to accept this man and to kind of from a distance, wonder about his own life.
It's beautiful. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, it's just thinking about that, right? Like he was pretty young, right, when he married his first wife.
Yeah. I think he was in his late 20s.
Think about that. 20s, marry your first love. It is the way that I read it. It was like that, in love type of fairy tale marriage, and then you go out boating, and then the guy you're with, speeds up, and your wife falls off, and she is essentially killed by the boat for whatever reasons, whether it's him speeding up or whatever. But then being, just I don't know, it's so powerful. It's just, and then reading that, and then him carrying the picture of that woman in his wallet, and then you finding it, his daughter. Like I try to put myself in your shoes, or his shoes, and have, like if I was married before my wife, and then it's just what do you, like, as a father, like what do you say, like when your daughter finds a picture of your first wife who you loved, and then your daughter who you love sees it, like, I mean, that's got to be a tough situation for him.
Yeah, that's very compassionate of you to feel that way, Trey. I mean, it really
because he had to lose the first woman he loved to get to the second woman he loved.
That's right. And he said he loved them equally but differently. And I often think about my mom's position in that too. I mean, how do you live with the presence of this woman who will never age, and they had been married for such a short period of time, they never even had the luxury of an argument. So my mom had to live with the day in and day outs of like the mortgage and the car payments and stuff. And there was this woman who was perfect in their midst. But my mom was also an incredible human being, and she did something that to this day still just gets me in my core, which is that she paid every year for the cemetery where Maureen was buried to lay a wreath at Christmas time on her grave. Years and years.
What a move. Like, that is just class. That is just like supportive wife. I don't care what was before me, I support you no matter what. That is just wow.
And it was genuine.
Yeah.
It really, like, she didn't do it because she felt like she had to, or that would look good. Like, that was just a genuine thing that she did.
Well, you said her presence was in the house. Like, you felt that presence around you.
I did. I actually have, my father kind of gifted me some little objects that Maureen had, like little toys, little figurines from her own childhood. And he just wanted me to have them. And as time went on, he even gave me the reel of their wedding tape. They were married in England. And he said, you can get this transferred and watch it someday, but only if you want. And I've never done it. I have it in the drawer. Maybe someday I will. But yeah, he entrusted me with a lot, and I'm grateful for that because it was a super important part of my, I guess, kind of learning to live with death.
Sure. Well, I mean, you volunteered at a hospice, right?
Yes.
So how do you, and this is interesting. I wanted to ask you this because I was reading your material, your book. So I'm very fascinated with near death experiences. Big fan of Raymond Moody's.
Yeah.
Um, he in his book Paranormal talks about a collective, I don't want to say near death experience, but death experience, collective death experience, where when you're around someone who's dying, there are reports. He actually did a study on this. I think he's trying to do a study on it. I think he is doing a study on this, or he did one, where you have the same experience as the person who dies. So let's say you're in hospice and there's someone who passes and goes to the other side. It's like he explains it as, because it happened to him with his mother. Like all his siblings were around her. She passed, but it was like the entire environment, the scene changed. It was like they went into some type of portal type scenario where even the layout of the room changed. It was just so amazing. Like they felt like this vibrational like change when all the vibration went up. It was very positive, very high energy, and like it felt like forever, but it was only a couple of minutes. Like, have you ever experienced anything like that volunteering in hospice?
Well, not exactly that, but I can tell you some very unusual things happen. Um, I was working in the biggest public hospital in New York City, so it was people at the very end of their lives too. I mean, they had hours or at most a couple of days to live. And I once went into a room. I didn't know the patient's name. I kind of walked in. I looked at her. She was probably in her late 80s, I was guessing. And when I finally looked at the chart, I realized that it was my father-in-law's cousin, really close cousin, that he spent a lot of time with growing up. And she was talking to people in the room who weren't there or that I couldn't see. I mean, they were very there for her. So she couldn't really see me, but she was chatting with these other beings who were in that space. And I had never seen anything like that before, but I heard it was very common. And I just kind of stepped back and I observed it a little bit. And then she said, Irving. And Irving was my husband's grandfather, and she had been very close to him. And I got that, like, those chills, realizing that I might be in the same space as my husband's grandfather. I mean, it really, it felt like that. It was that real for her. So why wouldn't I accept that part of her journey? So that felt significant to me. And I know that a lot of people experience loved ones coming around the bedside when they die. And we don't necessarily accept that so much in our culture, but we had a Maori patient from New Zealand once. And she said, yeah, this is, of course, like, there's no reason to doubt that. When I'm at the end, the ancestors I love will be all around me. They will be guiding me to the next life.
Yeah. I love it. I love all of that. Um, there's some really good stories, powerful stories in there, in the hospice, I guess, where some of those events happened. One of my favorite one. I think you made an altar for a couple. I think it was they had Indian background, and traveled to India with your family, and you went and made some makeshift type of altar for her. And it was just, I just thought that was a cute story.
Yeah, they were such a beautiful couple. And this is one of the great things about a public hospital in a place like New York is you will encounter every religious tradition, every spiritual tradition. You will encounter atheists and humanists and just everything. And it's beautiful like that.
Hmm.
And this couple, the woman was doing this practice called japa, where in Hinduism, you write the name in Sanskrit of a god. And she was writing, Hey Rama, 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 Rama in Sanskrit in a red pen. And her husband told me that that was to focus her mind on the divine towards the end of her life so that she would be really concentrated and that feel that connection to something greater than herself. And I remember that Gandhi did the same thing. I mean, it was said that he practiced japa saying Rama, Rama, Rama over and over again. And at the time when he died by an assassin's bullet, his final words were, Hey Rama.
Hmm,
And
that's
that's
powerful.
gorgeous. I mean, this woman took that practice right to New York and kept up something that was going to help her.
Sure. What did what did you experience when atheists were in there? Like what was that? Like I kind of I'm curious about that. Like what was their take on it?
So I'm so curious about people's beliefs, and to me, they don't necessarily need to belong to any particular tradition, but there's always a way to connect. Like people find spirituality in all kinds of places. So I found a lot that people who were atheists or agnostic connected a lot with nature. And the beauty of this Bellevue Hospital is that it was situated on the East River in New York, and you could see the East River from every window. And sometimes we would just sit together and watch the currents and the light bouncing off the rivers. And that is equally, I would say, equally a spiritual experience as writing the name of God or uttering certain words. And um, you know, I learned that you really have to have almost like a ministry of presence, if you're in there as a chaplain volunteer. And that just means showing up and meeting the people where they are, not being afraid to ask the stupid questions. Um, one of the Zen teachers who taught me to do hospice work, he said, everybody thinks initially when they do hospice work that you've got to go in there and have the big important questions, like the big conversations, answer their questions. It's so much stress. But if they want to just sit there and watch Jeopardy together, just sit there and watch Jeopardy with them.
Sure, that's good information. I think. Well, Ram Dass was a big hospice guy. Like we in the West, death isn't real. I mean, I think it is a little bit more now, but it wasn't visible, right? Like no, I mean, in India, and you can attest to this. I mean, you can literally see it in the streets. Here, it's not so much. It's very hidden still. I think we have viewings, but death is something that you don't really talk about, right? Like we just don't. It's it's a it's a transition. It can be a beautiful thing, and I think we're scared of it because it reminds us of our humanity. It reminds us of the temporariness that we have here on this earth, um, and it can frighten people. Um, I know reading Ram Dass's work has put a lot of things in perspective for me. Um, I think hospice work is very important because it helps that transition. Um, it helps us look at death differently. It helps us understand it. It helps us come together more. So I think that's great that this book has a lot of those stories in it because I think it will bring more awareness around the hospice work that you did.
There's a line of Ram Dass's that I love so much, and I really would think of this every single day when I was working on the hospice floor, which is that we're all just walking each other home. Like, how beautiful is that?
Yeah. I mean, he also said like we're all just God wearing drag too.
Yeah, that's right.
um, and so your book's getting ready to launch May 11th. May 10th is my birthday, so there's some good luck going there
Mhm.
for you. But it is, this book is very powerful. It is something that is your life's work, right? Like it's something that you put a lot of hours into. It's something that you passionately care about. Um, what are you hoping to do with this book?
Mm, Great question. So I actually wrote this book um, to be about living. Um, it sort of looks on the surface like it's a book about death and death awareness. But what I discovered in writing it and in living through these stories is that we can actually live our lives more fully, knowing that someday we will die, acknowledging that someday we will die. And when one of my earliest childhood friends was dying of cancer, she was given a year to live. Marissa was her name. And Marissa lived that last year of her life as beautifully as she could. She was of Italian heritage, and between chemo treatments, she and her husband went with her parents and her brother and sister in law to Italy and just lived it up. Went everywhere they ever wanted to go. I mean, had the most incredible experience as a family unit. Um, and she saw friends that she wanted to see, and she ate what she wanted to eat while she could. And she was full of joy and life. And I didn't think about the death part with her. It was a switch, you know. And I decided to kind of put myself on a year to live journey at the same time. Like, what would it be to think about what would I do if I had a year left to live? And that's a great question for all of us, I think. I mean, really kind of stepping back and saying, like, what's my bucket list, you know, but not just my superficial bucket list, like what do I want to have, where do I want to go, but a deep kind of meaningful bucket list. Like, what would you really want to do with the last year of your life? And you know, people have been advising us of this for ages, you know, like Rumi and the Prophet Muhammad and the Dalai Lama and, you know, the Buddha himself. And it's just all over all traditions to really kind of live with the end in mind. And we've lost sight of that a little bit. So it's a total paradigm change, I think,
Mhm.
to jump in and to live fully thinking about our mortality.
Sure. So what would you do if you had a year left to live?
I really would love to return to a place in India called Varanasi, which is a holy place on the Ganges River. It's a place where Hindus believe that if you die or are cremated in Varanasi, you're just going to kind of skip the next incarnation and advance. But it's such a sacred place. I mean, bodies are being burned on funeral pyres, but kids are playing ball and chasing their balls into the river, and people are doing their laundry and going about their life. It's like pre-biblical, you know, for people
Sure.
from Judeo-Christian backgrounds.
Were you ever intimidated by India? Because
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot, right? I mean, I just feel like there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of different belief systems. There's a lot of, there caste systems. There's so much there. Like it can be intimidating, I think.
That it can be totally intimidating. My husband Dave and I brought our kids to India, and I had spent some time living in Bangladesh, so I was familiar with the sights and sounds that are kind of from a similar region of the world, and the crushing poverty is really intense. But to see it through my kids' eyes was a beautiful thing. I mean, it's hard, and there's a lot of noise and tons of people, and yet they could really somehow imbibe that sense of beauty there. I mean, they walk through the flower markets. I mean, you've never seen flowers like this. Everything's so colorful. There's an altar on every corner. There are people like deeply devoted to their beliefs, not kind of hiding it in the way that we often do in this country, where everything is swept up and, you know, our little rosaries are put away and are the, you know, like we have our private objects of devotion, but there it's just like right out there. And you'll find Hanuman, like a 180-foot statue of a monkey god, and it's glorious.
I love that. Yeah, Sundays we break out the rosary. That's about it, right? So, I think your story is so interesting because you've written this book. It's about death, but you want people to be more aware of it. It's more about living, like you said. And not too recently, you were diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah, that's right. Just a week ago.
How long?
A week ago.
A week ago. A week ago, you were diagnosed. Your book hasn't even released yet. So talk about that. Like, you talk about living, but now you're faced with this obstacle. What are the thoughts that you're having?
Yeah. Talk about a real when the rubber meets the road kind of moment of life. I mean, this is it. Like, this is kind of what I was preparing for. I've been rereading my own book because the people who I learned from on hospice and the people I loved who I've lost, they were all my teachers. And the things I learned from them are impacting me deeply now. This is hard.
Sure.
This is
Yeah.
hard.
I think you can be more conscious to it, right? I think you can be more conscious through I don't know. I've never had cancer. I've never had that diagnosis. I don't know. But I think you have going through your life, just reading through your book. I think that if anything, this is an opportunity for you to go through this. It's just been a week since you got the diagnosis. But I think it's an opportunity for you to be more conscious of your humanity, of your beingness, of your source of power, the energy that is you, going into that, and, embracing that and allowing that to empower you through this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I mean, did they tell you what stage it is? Did they tell you anything else? Like, I don't mean to bring this up on the show, but I know that you said you wanted to be transparent, and I think I want to honor that, and I want to honor your privacy. But it is so powerful that you've written this book about death, about these people that have experienced this losses in their life. And then now you're facing something that we're all scared of, cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. So the craziest thing happened when my doctor told me I have cancer. And I think usually you go in and you sit with your doctor, but we're living during COVID. So she called me on the phone and, she said, do you have anybody near you who, could be of support? So I knew instantly that something was wrong. And I think because I've spent my whole life having my father say things like, this too shall pass, or sort of taking in these Buddhist lessons on impermanence, like that everything changes, every last thing is subject to change, that it wasn't shocking to me. It's strange. I mean, unhealthy-ish, I thought. I've never smoked. I don't really drink. I'm on the younger side. I mean, this should be like a complete shock and a surprise. But the bizarre thing after doing all of this work was a little bit like, yeah, that this body has the nature to change. So that was a little curious, I thought. Um, and then, like a day later, I noticed the mind's ability to kind of catastrophize and to be like, I, I don't know much about this cancer yet. They've got to do surgery in a couple of weeks in order to find out how far it's traveled in my body and whether I need I'm sure I need radiation, but chemotherapy on top of it. And like, how will this affect my life? And we all just spin out of control so much, don't we? I mean, we can tell ourselves these stories and we can almost even picture ourselves on our deathbeds after hearing news like that. But I went for a walk with a dear friend who has multiple sclerosis, and that's intense for him. And he gave me such incredible advice. I mean, he said, don't write chapter 21 of your life when you're only on chapter 4. And that just kind of cuts it right there, cuts all that thinking short, because he's right. I mean, what point is there to worry? I mean, we can plan, but worrying is just not going to do us any good.
Sure. No, but it's the human mind, the ego that fast forwards to the future and sees us on our deathbed, that basically plots our demise, that shows us everything that's going to go wrong, and we have to be in the moment, right? Like we have, that's what Ron Doss says. I mean, you be here now. um it's just I think, one, I just want to thank you for sharing that. That's tough. That's, that is tough. um how 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 young are your kids now?
So that's been the hardest part, I have to say. My kids aren't that young anymore. And one is 21 and he's living in college in Boston, and we're in New York City. And our other son is a senior in high school. And and this was hard for them. This was really intense. And they both said separately, please don't die on me.
Mm.
And
Mm.
just hearing that, um, that very honest reaction, please don't die on
Yeah.
me. Like, I need you. We get to this age where our kids are older and you think they're all grown up and they can handle all kinds of stuff, but they admitted, like, so beautifully and tenderly, that we're not done yet.
Sure. No, I think like, I don't know. I mean, I could go tomorrow. I don't know, but I think you got to live your best life right now. Like you got to be in that moment. You got to be present wherever you're at, be 100% in. And that's the key to life. That is, if you can do that, if you can go there mentally, suppress the ego enough where you can fully be aware of the moment and just be in it. And that God is in the moment, right? Like that,
I
that's
think
what they,
that's right. That's all we can do. We can inhabit this moment right now. I mean, I think we're a society like bent on transcendence. Like we want these big moments, big explosive experiences. And really the secret to it all, I think, is just in the most minute piece of time and place that we can break it down to, like right now.
yeah.
Can we feel our feet right now? Like, can we feel our fingers? Like, just really inhabiting these bodies and this very breath.
Oh man, I do it. Like I'll meditate and I'll try to go to a different place, and just so I can be like, oh, I want to feel that enlightenment. I want to feel that awareness, the oneness. I want to be there, and it's like, then I'm brought back to this reality, and it's like, well, now I need to be here. I need to be in the body. And then I hear about all of the great things the bodies can do, and our bodies can do amazing things. Our bodies can heal itself. It can change the cells. Uh, Biology in our body. Like it's just, it's amazing what we can do. We're just not conscious of it. um so it's like, it's just it's escapism when we try to be somewhere else and we don't want to be here. We meditate and we try to go feel the oneness. We want to go feel enlightenment. We do all of that. We're escaping, trying not to be human, but it's we are human. We are this. There is a expiration date on us. Like we are these, again, as Ram Dass says, I am just this decaying model, 1983 model. I am decaying every day. And one day I will be here no more. And my energy, my source, my soul will leave here and go back to its home, essentially. And who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Raymond Moody only got me to the gates, with his near death experience, his life after lives book. Like, everybody wants to say that he's proven life after death. And I love Raymond Moody, and he'll tell you this himself. He has not proven life after death, but he has gotten us to the gates. It's not until we take that leap of faith, when we get there, do we find out the compassionate, the loving God that we believe there to be. And, you see it, you see evidence of that. You see, when you go to these places like the hospice centers, you have these experiences with the patients, and you can just tell there's something else there. There's something out there. There's something on the other side. What is it? You read people's, stories. Eben Alexander, his story with near death experience. Anita Morjani, her story, and it's like, what? Like,
Yeah.
there's something there, but there's a beauty in not knowing too, right? There, if we knew everything, if we knew everything, what fun would that be?
Yeah.
Like what fun would that be if I knew what to expect on the other side of that? I mean, there is fear, but I think faith transcends fear. I've said this before on here. Fear knocked at the door, faith answered, and no one was there.
Mm. Trey, am so comfortable with not knowing. I mean, maybe it's because some of my greatest teachers have been Native American elders. Um, but I love the concept of the great mystery. Like that is good for me. I'm like good to go with the great mystery. I like it better than the pearly gates in my little worldview. I I'm down with that. I mean, there's paradox and things we just can't explain. You know, I love the opening lines of the Tao, which say like the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. I mean, these things are ineffable, and to be able to kind of understand that we can't grasp it, we can't see it, we can't even put words to it. It's so much bigger than us. Is I don't know. I love that. I love it.
I do
I'm
too.
all in.
You sound like you've done a lot of meditating. Have you in your research, in your even writing this book, have you ever had like mystical experiences, like where you experienced something that you cannot explain?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely have. There are these great 10-day retreats all over the world. They've got hundreds of centers, and they are run by this Burmese meditation master who is no longer alive, but they caught the whole 10-day retreat on a tape. And those retreats are absolutely mind blowing. I mean, they are wildly difficult to do. You go, you commit to 10 days. The gong goes off at 4:30 in the morning, and you've got to get yourself out of bed. I'm not a morning person. You got to get yourself, to the meditation hall, and you're meditating for like 14 hours a day. And something will absolutely happen to your mind when you're meditating that much.
What happens to it?
So everybody's different. Um, I think one of the most intense experiences I ever had, I was in so much pain. My neck was killing me, my back was killing me. It's really hard to sit on a cushion physically. I didn't think sitting would be so physically difficult. And I went outside one day on a little break, and I lay down on the lawn and I was looking up at the sky, and everything switched. Now, it wasn't so much that, I mean, it was like those subject object experiences where you think you're looking at two vases and then you see the faces of two women or something like that. It's like the whole world kind of flipped flopped, and I was in the eternal, and I was in this space that was so big for days, actually for weeks. I mean, I didn't think I would ever leave it, but I did. And I learned that, these experiences can be a little bit detrimental, because the next time you meditate, you're sort of wanting that again and you're grasping for it. And you really just think, how can I get back to that place of just absolute beauty where everything makes sense? And that's not it. Like, the real point is coming back to this moment, this moment where, my knee hurts, and, the neighbor upstairs is banging something, and, this moment without judgment.
Mm. How do you keep your awareness about you, especially now?
Mm. I think that the time on the cushion pays off. Like, no moment on the cushion is ever wasted, and it comes and it supports you, I think, when you need it, and kind of reminds you to be present. Although I was thinking a lot lately, I was talking to a meditation teacher, and they said, well, you're going to double down on your practice and get on the cushion. And I thought, maybe, like, I do love that practice and I know how important it is, but wow, is it hard to meditate sometime, right? So I have this little practice that I love, and it's so simple. And I have a little beautiful little teacup on my windowsill in the kitchen. And in the mornings, when I'm pouring water into the tea kettle, I pour a little bit of water into that cup. And I just kind of maybe call in or think about people I love who are in my Heartwood, like my mom and my dad who have passed away. Or I think about really inspiring teachers like the poet Rabia and the poet Rumi and their beautiful Sufi words of wisdom, just masters of different traditions. And I sort of make that as an offering to them. That's my little altar. And at the end of the day, I take that little cup of water and I pour it into a house plant and just kind of give
Mm.
it back to the soil, give it back to the plant. And it's quirky, it's my own thing, but it makes
Love
all
that.
the difference in the world to me.
I love that. That's such a cool little practice. How did it all start for you though? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I grew up in a religious dogma, right? Like, no awareness whatsoever. Like, very scared of the second coming of Christ, thinking that was going to be something that is, I had to be good, I had to be perfect, or I'm going to hell. Like, it wasn't until like maybe 33. I'm 38 now. Well, I'll be 38. That I started kind of questioning it, right? Like, I mean, I guess I started, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, I was at the self actualization part, and I started, just trying to find my spirituality. Just who is Trey really? Not even spirituality, just source. Like, what is this? Why am I here? And I started. I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not saying that I am awakened. I'm just saying that I have a different perspective, and I'm very curious about things, and I seek the truth, which I think is all you can do, really. But for you, like, when did that curiosity ever peak for you? Did you ever feel like you needed to find out more about why we're here, and when did that happen for you?
Mm. So I grew up in the Protestant churches of New Jersey, and wherever we lived, we kind of went to the closest church. So I was in the Presbyterian church and the Methodist church, and I have a lot of Dutch ancestors, and we were at the Reformed Church of America, which came from Holland, and people spoke Dutch, and I mean that was pretty strict sometimes, and they really wanted you to show up. And I had a really difficult experience with the church that I was confirmed in when I graduated from high school. I went to college out of state, and then I went and lived in Japan for 2 years teaching English. And while I was there, I got a note from the church saying that they questioned my belief in God and my relationship with the church, which was God. And they were taking me off the membership rolls. And that was one of the hardest things of all times. I mean, that is hard. I mean, I wasn't even done with that tradition in that particular church. But they tossed me out. I mean, I felt pretty excommunicated. And I knew that I had to go off seeking. And I had gone to a college that had its roots in the Quaker tradition. And that's the first place I ever experienced silence and stillness as the primary way of being in touch with God. So I would go to Quaker meeting and it's quiet. You just sit there and you get in touch with your inner light. And sometimes people are called to speak and they'll speak. And the first time I went, I got a serious case of the giggles. Like I could not stop laughing, like because I couldn't believe that everybody was just sitting there. But I think now as I have become a meditator and I'm so attracted to silence and stillness and going within, that probably had its roots in Quakerism.
Mm.
And I married a man who comes from a Jewish background, and we are raising both of our kids Jewish. They both had bar mitzvahs. And I am just able to see this absolute beauty in Judaism too. Especially, I don't think I've seen a religion that has such beautiful traditions around death as I've seen in Judaism. I mean, people sit Shiva with a family who's lost someone, which means that you go to them and you bring them food and you follow their lead. If they want to talk about the person, they raise the person first, and then you kind of jump in, but you really learn how deeply to listen. Wow, what wisdom.
Yeah, that is powerful. I love the silent stuff. It's so hard to be silent, quiet the mind. It's something that is it's powerful when you can do it. Like when you can silence the mind, tap into that source, like you can you almost feel your brain changing. Like it's just like you can almost feel yourself moving out of that prefrontal cortex area and just kind of going all over the place. It's like it's tough. It is a practice. It is something you need to practice every day. I think it's very beneficial. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah.
Barbara Becker, this has been fantastic. You are fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on here. How can people find out more about you? Where can they go? Where can they buy this book?
I have a website, barbarabecker.com, and the book is now on pre-order wherever books are sold.
Pre-order that bad boy because I can tell you right now, it is fantastic. Heartwood, it's going to be a #1 best-selling. I can tell it right now. Barbara, what do you want your legacy to be?
I want to be remembered as a woman who sat down at the feet of the world's wisdom traditions and learned everything I could with all of my being so that I could turn around and offer it to others so it might help them live fulfilling lives too.
I love that. Barbara, thank you so much for joining. This has been amazing. Thank you for agreeing to come on. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you for all of the beautiful work you do and all of your commitment to being a seeker.